Hey everybody, Marie Ridgway here, and today we're going to be talking about corrective exercises specific to police work and first responders. And I am introducing you here to Don Bruce. He is the owner of Your Fitness Results, LLC, and he's going to be talking to you about upper cross syndrome, corrective exercises, and some other pieces that can help. So of course I speak about resilience factors. I'm sure you've all heard me talk about sleep as the most important. And then the very next most important factor is exercise and movement for all kinds of good reasons. We hold stress in our body as muscle tension. And so knowing how to kind of correct and relieve some of the places in our body where we hold stress is sort of the idea here. So beyond just getting those minutes of exercise in, I thought it could be helpful to speak specifically to your profession and ways you can help your physical body feel better. So Don is a certified personal trainer. He attended the National Academy of Sports Medicine for Health and Fitness. He's a performance enhancement specialist and a corrective exercise specialist. I chose him because in my journey of trying to come back from a major injury when I broke my scapula and one of my vertebrae, I just wasn't getting better after about a year and was doing what the doctors had said, which was almost nothing, but trying what I could and what I had been told would work, but it wasn't. So I have made so much progress with Don. I don't have pain anymore. I know a lot of you all do have chronic pain, so I really just wanted to share this information and this resource with you. So I will step away here and turn it over to Don.
Thank you, Marie. Once again, my name is Don Bruce. So today we're specifically going to be talking about corrective exercise. And this is going to be in regards to what we call upper cross syndrome. Now that is typically where your shoulders internally rotate and your neck jets forward. And I'll get a lot more into that very, very soon here. But first, I just want to give a quick overview on how this presentation is going to flow and kind of what you can expect from this video. So first things first, we want to go in depth of what upper cross syndrome is. Next, we want to talk about how it forms, how it comes about, associated injuries involving upper cross syndrome, what is corrective exercise, and basically how it can help reverse the effects of how we've kind of molded our body into. And then at the very end, I just want to give some examples of the corrective exercise strategy to help correct that upper cross syndrome. All right, next slide. All right, so what is upper cross syndrome? Essentially, it's a fancy way of saying you've got overactive muscles and underactive muscles, okay? And these overactive muscles are pulling you into a certain position, while the underactive muscles are staying lengthened back there. Now, there's a bunch of different ways how we can kind of get stuck in this position, right? Whether it would be typing all day, driving the squad car or ambulance, maybe even reaching over to type on the laptop, right? Over days, weeks, months, years, we've kind of molded our position into this altered movement pattern. Now, this altered movement pattern is not very good, right? Our body does not want to be here, but we've kind of trained it to be there. So some of the overactive muscles that you will commonly see in upper cross syndrome is going to be the pec major, pec minor. So your pecs, your upper trap muscles, which are just next to your shoulders, usually sore on most people. Your lat muscles, commonly referred to as your lats. Those are going to be just under your armpit right here. And then your neck extensors. Think about extension going out and then flexion coming in. And then transversely on the other side of the body, what is not being used as much as it should be to kind of pull us back into position, it's those mid-low trap muscles. So they are just below the upper trap muscles, rhomboids that sit just under the mid-low traps, and then those deep neck flexors, right? So the ones that pull your head down. There's quite a few more muscles involved in upper cross syndrome, but these are the major big ones that we talk about quite often. These are the ones that are really adding to the problem. And if we can really address these specific muscles, we can usually correct that upper cross syndrome movement pattern. All right, next slide. Okay, so the most common causes of upper cross syndrome, a lot of it's coming from too much sitting. The average American sits close to 10 hours a day, and the workforce, about 43% of them just sit and work. So we're talking strictly desk job. They don't get up and move. And from this too much sitting can cause this poor posture. We've all experienced it, right? We are hunched over, our hands are typing, and it's going to cause our shoulders to internally rotate, right? Which is going to tighten up those pec muscles and lengthen those back muscles. And we kind of just get stuck here. Sometimes it's just watching a funny video on YouTube, right? We sit very lazily, right? And over time, that can create a very, very poor posture. When you are wearing your utility vest, right? You get a bunch of pockets right over here. I got a nice little picture on the screen. A lot of that can add excess weight on the shoulders, right? Pulling the shoulders down and internally rotating them. And that is another cause of that internal rotation shoulder. Lastly, just the under usage of our back muscles, right? If you don't use it, you lose it. A very few times in the day, we actually have to take something and pull it towards us. And unless you're being cautious of your posture, you very rarely actually use these muscles. So what happens is we get a lot of use in the front, right? Whether it's pushing something, typing, driving, or maybe you're at the gun range, right? You're practicing this motion. A lot of things are going forward, but not too much is going backwards. And that's where a lot of that weakness can come from, not using those posture muscles quite often as we should. Next slide. All right. So you can probably guess that being stuck in this altered movement pattern, it's not too great for you. And I just want to go over some of the injuries that are associated with this and can commonly occur. Number one is headaches, right? You ever wonder why you always have a headache when you wake up? Potentially because you're overactive muscles, right? Overactive upper traps. Bicep tendonitis. Let's say you're working out, but your shoulders are very internally rotated. A lot of that strain isn't going to go where it should, right? Which puts a lot of beating on the biceps tendon. Tendonitis is not too great. Can last about 3 to 6 months, sometimes more. It's a very distinct burning pain. Tendons take quite a long time to heal because they don't get much blood flow. So that is not a good one. A rotator cuff impingement. For those of you who do not know, the rotator cuff muscles it's 4 of them, and it actually stabilizes the shoulder joint, right? If you impinge one of those, you're putting too much pressure and you're causing this rubbing damage. And how about you, but it's not too great when you can't use a shoulder, especially in the line of work you guys do. Neck pain. When you are stuck in this position and your head's like this, right? It's almost like putting a 43-pound bowling ball right on your neck. It is a lot of weight. And that is not good. So neck pain is a huge potential injury. And then last but not least, it's called thoracic outlet syndrome. If any of you ever experienced it, you know it hurts quite a bit. Essentially, it's pain that runs down your arm to your fingers and also manifests in the shoulder. It's coming from your neck, a certain part of the spine. Yeah, long story short, upper cross syndrome can cause a lot of injuries, and they are not too fun to deal with. Next slide. So we've kind of talked about upper cross syndrome and how it's not good, right? What can cause it, how we're all guilty of maybe getting into that position. But now I kind of want to talk about how we're going to correct this, right? So by the book definition, for those of you who do not know what corrective exercise is, it's essentially a term used to describe the systematic process of identifying a neuromuscular dysfunction. Simply put, identifying how your body isn't working the way it should, why it's stuck in a certain position, right? And then going forward, developing a plan of action and implementing it using an integrated corrective exercise strategy, right? And this integrative strategy is going to come from 4 different parts. Some of them you guys might have seen, like lengthening, talks about static stretching. But the 4 parts to corrective exercise are SMR, which just stands for self-myofascial release, otherwise known as trigger point release, lengthening and or stretching the muscle, activating the muscle, so basically using that underactive muscle that doesn't have work, and then lastly, it's integration using a dynamic exercise. So at the very end, taking your body to that range of motion where it can now learn that new movement pattern you have introduced to it. Next paragraph. I'm sorry, next slide. Okay. So when we talk about SMR, right, self-myofascial release, it is going to come from a few different common things. Number one, I'm sure you've all seen it, right? It's the handy foam roller. And then also another great tool is like a lacrosse ball or a dense ball. Essentially what you're doing is you're finding that spot, right? And the spots we identified, which are the overactive muscles, you're finding that spot that really makes you go, ooh, that is tender, that is tight, that does not feel good, right? And when you identify that area, the trick is really just to hold that position. Yes, it's called the foam roller, doesn't mean you have to roll around on it, right? The rolling is to find that really, really trigger sensitive point. And when you find that area, you want to hold it. So in layman's terms, there's 2 things in your brain that connects to your body, essentially, that is going to help with this process. It's called the muscle spindles and then the Golgi tendon organ. A muscle that is overactive, let's say it's your pecs, constantly in flexion. It's being told, engage, engage, engage. When you're adding that pressure, whether it be with a lacrosse ball or foam roller, you're adding that pressure to that overactive area. What you're doing is you're telling those muscle spindles to calm down, and it promotes what we call the Golgi tendon organ. It basically promotes lengthening, okay? So it takes your very tight muscle, and then it essentially goes like this. Because let's say you want to stretch a muscle, right? But it's really, really tight. It's not going to budge. When you give it the opportunity, when you release that tension, now it has the opportunity to actually stretch. So that is basically what is happening when you're doing that self-myofascial release. You're adding that pressure and you're releasing that tension. And specific areas for correcting upper cross syndrome is going to be the areas we just talked about. It's going to be the pecs, upper traps, lats, and then the neck extensors. I tried to pull a couple of really good images just to show you exactly where you'd want to put this foam roller and or ball. For the pecs, right, a great way to do it is to lean up against a wall, having the lacrosse ball, wanting to put it right in that pec minor area. It's going to be the muscle that runs right along the pec here. That's a great trigger point to release that pec muscle. And then the picture next to it, it's going to be basically foam rolling those lats, right? So she's got the ball under that tension right here, right before it inserts into the tricep. This is usually a very, very tender area on people. When you put pressure on the area, it helps release tension all along the side of your body. And then as far as your neck muscles are concerned, you can also lay against the wall. And the figure I got in the bottom left kind of gives you a little area where you can put the ball and apply that pressure. So those are a few examples of areas you can foam roll and or use a dense ball to release that tension. Next slide. Okay. So following the corrective exercise continuum, first things first, you want to release that tension, right? Next, it's going to be examples of stretching. We just released the tension of those muscles. And since they are now released, let's try and really stretch them out. So a few examples of this are stretching the pecs, upper traps, lats, and the neck extensors. Looks like the picture got cut off a little bit, but a great stretch that I love is putting each hand on the edge of a door frame and then just leaning forward. You are stretching out all of these muscles, anterior shoulder, pec. You're really lengthening them up. So it helps you go from here to here. Another great stretch would be a neck stretch, right? So if you take your hand, grab the opposite ear, and then just let gravity help you out. You're not only stretching that neck, but you're also getting that trap on the opposite side. And then the bottom picture, essentially what the guy's doing is he's holding a pole and he's leaning back. That is going to be a great stretch for your lats. It's really going to help lengthen out that muscle. I love using gravity and other surfaces to really help get a deep stretch. And then last, the neck extensors, right? A great way to do it is just to clasp your hands, elbows in, and then just gently let gravity help you stretch out those neck muscles. All right, next slide. Okay, so now that we've released tension in the overactive muscles and we have lengthened those overactive muscles, next part we want to do is activate those underactive muscles, right? So the muscles that aren't getting enough work, they're being lazy, they're not being utilized. And in the upper cross syndrome, it's what's basically preventing us from being good at doing this. So activating those underactive muscles. One of the best things you can do to activate underactive muscles, especially for the mid-low traps, is basically doing a band row, right? And essentially what you're doing is you are taking the weight or band and you're pulling it towards your body. Some of the muscles that are primarily getting worked are those mid-low traps. Something to keep in mind with this, shoulders down, right? We're always like this. We're always so tense. Shoulders down, taking the weight or band, pulling it towards your body. The next is those rhomboid muscles. An exercise I love to do for this one, they're called external rotations, okay? So you're taking the band and you're basically just pulling it apart, squeezing your shoulder blades. You are working a lot of rhomboid muscles in that exact movement. And then lastly is the deep neck flexors. There's this thing called the chin tuck, right? If you're stuck in here, you're basically just going to practice tucking your chin. It's kind of funny because you get to make a double chin. You will also feel it where that mid-low trap area is as well. So those are a couple examples of muscle activation regarding those underactive muscles. Next slide. And yeah, as Marie said, she reached out and she kind of expressed her pain and her ailments, and I was pretty confident I could help her. But the first month I worked with her, our main goal was to fix that pain she had in her scapula. She had a lot of tight overactive muscles, primarily that trap subscapularis. And that was what we did. We mainly focused on that. And after about a month of that, well, then we had her do some really specific activation techniques to help strengthen those areas that were really weak. Because, you know, if you just go ahead and beat up your muscles after you've released them, you're just going to add to the problem. And then I think after about 8 to 10 weeks, that's when we actually got to exercise. And essentially, she was pain-free and she was able to strengthen her body and actually work out again. But yeah, your fitness results, Don Bruce has my phone number and there is my website.
Is there any amount of time per day you would recommend doing these corrective exercises you mentioned, or just once a day or twice? Or
If you are struggling with upper cross syndrome and you have chronic pain, like your neck hurts, your upper back hurts. We're all busy people, right? The perfect answer would be twice a day. Even just doing the stretching and the trigger point release twice a day would be great, but at least once a day, making an effort, essentially. And by the book, 30 seconds to a minute, as far as holding that stretch, holding that lacrosse ball in that tender area, and then activating those underactive muscles. Shoot close to 20 reps, nice and slow.
And I know you mentioned the lacrosse balls, the foam roller. It looked like it had the ridges on it, and then the exercise straps or bands. Or though I assume you can get all those on Amazon or wherever at a store.
Yeah, Amazon, Target, Walmart, you name it. The foam rollers. Let's say you are a muscular person and the smooth foam rollers don't do it for you. These ones are great because these little knobs can help press deeper into that muscle tissue of yours.
Awesome.
And yeah, and if you want to save some money, maybe play it against sports. That's a great place to buy them as well.
Cool. Very nice. Well, thanks. You can, if you choose to work with Don specifically on something, you can work with him at a gym or he can come in home, if I'm saying that correctly. And you can reach out if you're interested.
Thanks again, Marie.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.